Good afternoon, English 218. Mike here from the bowels of Lunder Hall once again. Quick video here. I hope everybody's doing well. It's week 9. Things are starting to get a little hectic. Days are getting shorter. I know what that's like. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about your blog assignments and some of the key themes or things that I've seen in reading those. I want to remind you sort of why we're doing that assignment, and then of course I want to talk to you about your fact sheet assignment. So let's start with the goals of these assignments. Again, I can't stress enough how important these two assignments are within the class. I think it's really critical for us as writers to be able to really calibrate our writing to different audiences and to be able to move registers. And I think that's a singing term, but to be able to sort of move up and down in terms of the complexity and the sophistication of our writing as our audience dictates. And so I just want to remind you that that's why we're doing this. And I think many of you are getting that. And are seeing the differences rhetorically between this blog assignment where you're communicating to a public that doesn't share your background and a research paper. But I have to admit, many of the blogs that I read were probably, if we're thinking of it as a continuum, were probably closer to the research paper than they were to the blog assignment. And so what I would encourage you to do is to think about your audience in particular. Think about some of the unique challenges of communicating to the public. So of course we have to think about engagement and making sure that the reader pays attention in the first place. We have to think about the level of detail that the reader is really going to need. We also have to think about the level of language that we're using. And all of those decisions really make a difference, and they culminate in either a document that's going to be exceptionally useful to a readership of the general public, or it's going to have the effect of alienating, confusing, misleading, etc., etc., etc. And so that's really what the heart and soul of this assignment is about. And the same thing is true of your fact sheet assignment, except in that case, we're just going to accelerate the process. And we're going to have a lot more confined real estate. We're only going to have one side of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and we're really going to have to think carefully about how we present that information. But we'll get to that in a second. As far as the blogs go, a few things I want to talk to you about. One is the use of sources. Okay, so one of the stipulations in the assignment sheet for this particular assignment is that you have to use more than one source. I stipulate 3, 2 of which have to be from peer-reviewed publications. The idea there, the thinking behind that, and the reason why I created that stipulation isn't just because I'm sinister or because that's what somebody did to me and I think you have to do the same thing. It's actually because I think it's really important for you to be able to braid those sources in some meaningful way. You couldn't see it, but I was braiding with my hands. And I think it's really important, rather than seeing sources in isolation, that we start to work on putting those sources into conversation with one another. And that's really what this is about. So one of the things that I noticed and I remarked on when it came to your blogs pretty consistently was that people were treating their articles or the sources for their blog in isolation. And what that does is it creates a false sort of barrier between those things. And many times those sources are saying virtually the same thing. They may have just used different methodologies, or they may have happened at different times, or they may have studied different populations. But what I would encourage you to keep in mind is don't treat those things in isolation when you can. It's perfectly fine for 2 sources to share the space of the same paragraph. In fact, that has the effect of bolstering your claims and making your claims seem stronger and more credible. Because part of what I wanted you to do here was to show that there is an emerging or an existing body of research that suggests something that can inform the way that people do their everyday lives and improve their lives. And that's really what this is about. So I think you have to become comfortable rather than treat, even though they're 2 very distinct things, they were probably 2 25 or 30 page manuscripts, we have to think about how we can weave those into one another. We need to talk about where they agree or maybe where they disagree, but don't treat them exclusively in isolation, because that really does your writing a disservice. In a related note, I want to talk to you about credibility. And so credibility, obviously, when we're talking about important subjects like psychology and social science and the health sciences, credibility it's imperative. We need to make sure that our readers know that what we're communicating isn't just our held beliefs or something that we heard, but something that has been documented in very credible, reputable, peer-reviewed, vetted places. And many of you need some work in terms of integrating that source material in meaningful ways. In this particular assignment, because we're communicating with the general public, I personally and generally, as a general rule, I don't care about APA citation. That's not what this is about. It's about attribution. And attribution is a place where we can garner a lot of credibility. And so for the purposes of this assignment, make sure that you're consistently tagging information with a source, according to researchers at Ohio State University, according to the National Institute of Health, according to a study conducted in 2017. You have to have those little tag phrases so that the reader knows, and so that you're signaling, hey, this isn't just my opinion, this isn't just something that I heard secondhand, this is something that comes from a verifiable source. So you have to think carefully about attribution. Just because we're communicating with the general public does not get us off the hook here. We still are responsible for our own credibility as writers. Okay. Now, on the flip side, and I saw this in a couple of your blogs, I don't want you to get bogged down in that. I don't need you to, have a 50-word title to an article embedded in there. You have to think sort of rhetorically and creatively about how you attribute that information to a source. And I would do it in probably the most unobtrusive way possible, either just saying according to a 2017 study, or according to researchers here, or according to an expert named this. You want to do it in ways that are economical and don't eat up a lot of space and don't elicit a lot of confusion, but at the same time it's critical, okay? And this is particularly important. Many of you chose to write in the first person, right? I. And I think that's great. And I think that by utilizing your own personal experience with the topic, you're automatically building a level of engagement with your reader that you might otherwise not be able to. But the fact of the matter is, nobody is going to take an article seriously if it is exclusively written in the first person, because when you write in the first person, you're talking about one set of experiences, okay? And those are hard to extrapolate. Now, the first person has many, many benefits, but one of the things that the first person doesn't allow us to do is to generalize that experience. And so, there's a remedy to this. Braid in the research. How does the research sort of jive with or corroborate what you're saying about yourself? And when you do that, you're going to yield credibility. And then, and only then, will people take what you're saying seriously, and then and only then will they act upon it. So I think that's obviously really important. I would also, sort of in a related or somewhat unrelated note, I would also encourage you to think carefully about the level of detail you have to provide about certain things, okay? Just because the information is present in the source material does not mean you have to share it with the reader. One of the things that we're responsible for as people communicating with the public about a topic is what we don't include. We often don't frame it in that way, but one of the most important decisions writers make is what not to include. Okay? When we omit things, when we make selective edits, when we trim things, when we paraphrase things, we're removing things, right? And that's critical, and we're doing that for some rhetorical effect. Now, hopefully that rhetorical effect is to put the focus and the emphasis on the things that really move the needle with the reader, okay? And in this case, you really need to think about that. And where I'm seeing this most importantly is in the level of detail people are providing about research methods. Now, it may be important to signal to the reader that this study covered 47,000 people across the United States just to give a sense of the scope and the scale of the study, but you don't really need to get into the minutia of the study. Okay? So one of the things I always want you to ask is, I want you to zoom out when you're writing something like this, and this is a little bit salty, I guess, and ask yourself, what's the one friggin' thing I want the reader to take away? Okay? And if the information you're providing doesn't contribute to that one friggin' thing, then you have to ask yourself, why is it in there? Okay? If you can justify it, and this is something I tell students all the time, if you can justify a rhetorical decision, if you can say, I used that word, I included this, I omitted this, I framed it this way, I phrased it this way, the grammar of this sentence is such because, and you have a good user or reader-centered reason why, then it's probably a good decision. If you're just doing something because you saw somebody else do it in another venue, or because it was the first thing that came to mind, or it was the path of least resistance, that's probably not a good rhetorical decision, okay? So I want you to be thinking about, what do you want your reader to take away from this? So that's really critically important, okay? In summary, those are probably the most important things I'm seeing with your blogs. As a rule, I was very happy with them, and I think people are getting a lot out of this. As a writing instructor, every time I construct an assignment, I have certain things that I'm trying to get you to do. And so the things that I've mentioned here about braiding resources, about thinking about attribution, about thinking about credibility, thinking about what a reader needs to know, I hope those are some of the core lessons that you're taking away from this. Because I can assure you that at some point in your career, whether it's in a formal written format or in a presentation format, you're going to be asked to communicate to a public audience, and you're going to have to balance all of those things. And so I think it's good practice to do it here in sort of a low stakes, and I say that because my grade's not on the line, but it is a low stakes environment, okay? And we're going to learn from that. So I hope that you go in, take a look at the feedback I've provided you and your classmates have provided you in the forum. That feedback is invaluable. There are very few places in this world where you're going to have built-in feedback. It discourages me to no end that people either don't provide feedback in the form, and trust me, you'll be penalized for that, because that's one of the core things in this class, is that you're expected to be part of a learning community. And my expectation is that you're going to be in there. If you're going to receive feedback, you damn well better provide feedback, because that's part of, I think that's your ethical responsibility, and you should be doing that. If you can't do that and you can't hold up your end of the bargain, you need to let me know, because it's unfair to your partner. Okay? But that feedback is imperative. Okay? If I tell all my writing classes this. I could end class in about 30 seconds, a 3-credit college class. If all my only job was to make better writers, all I would ever have to say is get feedback and make revisions. Okay? And if you do that, you follow that iterative process of feedback loops, you're going to become a better writer. In this class, we build in some of the labor and some of the responsibility of providing feedback. And so it's really critical that you go in and take a look at that feedback. And I want to create a distinction here. And you probably heard this in English 101. And I try not to retread English 101. I try to work from an assumption that you know and understand this, but I think this bears repeating. There's a fundamental difference between revision and editing. Okay? Revision, if you look at the word, means to literally re-see. Revision are substantial, substantive, large-scale changes to a document. Okay? It's reordering. It's eliminating paragraphs. It's reframing how you approach the subject. It's thinking more carefully about your audience and the language that you use. Okay? Revision is our main priority in this class. Editing is when you go in and you fine-tune the language and the citation style and all this sort of stuff. I'm not going to say that stuff's not important, because obviously your ability to adhere to those conventions and rules plays a role in your credibility. But for the purposes of this class, I want to see your willingness and ability to revise. I want to see your willingness and adeptness at making significant changes. And so make sure that you're going into that document and that you're using that feedback and mobilizing that feedback in the most useful way possible. And in some cases, that's going to require you to make significant changes to the document. Okay? Sometimes, I've had to do this as a writer. You flip your document upside down. You turn it inside out. You make significant changes. But what we know and what the research tells us is that good writers are not afraid of making revisions. They're not afraid of re-seeing their writing. Okay? Novice writers want to go in and use a scalpel when a hatchet is the appropriate tool. And I'm going to encourage you, because of the time that we have in this class and because of the amount of time we devote to feedback, make sure you spend your time doing that. Period. Full stop. Okay? So enough preaching. Let's talk about the fact sheet assignment. Okay, this isn't a major assignment in terms of your grade, but I think it's a major assignment in terms of your professional development as a writer, and it's your chance to effectively take your blog and turn it into a handout format. You have a series of videos that you can watch this week to learn some of the document design strategies that will inform this. You're going to learn 2 in particular: CRAP, which stands for contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. I think about CRAP virtually anytime I sit down to write anything, whether it's an email, a handout, a letter, a manual, doesn't matter, a syllabus. Everything I write, I think about CRAP, because I want to think about how the reader's actually going to engage with that document. HAT stands for headings, access, typography, and space. Those are 4 other things in addition to CRAP that we can manipulate to make our documents more user-friendly. But at the end of the day, the purpose of this assignment is to give you experience. And I understand there's a difference between performance and learning. Okay? I don't expect you to be able to create the world's greatest handout in the world or the world's greatest fact sheet in the world in your first go-around, but I do expect, through the experience of trying to distill your blog into a 1-page document, you're going to learn a great deal about how to value certain things, how to create hierarchy within your documents, so showing the order of importance, how to allocate space on the page, how to communicate things rapidly, how to tune up your language and turbocharge your language so that you're doing more with less. Those are all outcomes, okay? And I just want to see that you're attempting to do that. And I think that's also a very important practical skill, to be able to take a larger communicative goal and to deliver that goal in a really small package. And I've had to do this countless times throughout my career. When I go to a meeting to present a new initiative or a new idea, oftentimes I have to distill it to a fact sheet. Sometimes I give presentations to various groups, and I want them to have some takeaway, because presentations have a tendency to sort of dissolve in the ether, and I need to be able to give them something that when they leave that particular moment, it's going to be useful, it's going to be helpful and thorough, and those types of things. And I think it's just a great exercise for us to be able to do that. What this is ultimately going to lead into is our final unit of the semester, and that will be our annotated bibliography and literature review assignment, where, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm going to challenge you to become the leading expert about a particular topic on campus, but we'll get to that at another time. So that's what we're up to in this class. I hope you're enjoying the class. Most importantly, I hope you're learning. if you're learning a lot. I don't really care if you're enjoying the class. No, I'm kidding, of course, but I hope both of those things are happening. I hope that you are challenging yourself to participate in all of the activities and requirements of the class, because they've been curated and constructed in such a way that by virtue of doing the things I'm asking you to do, I don't think it's possible to not learn, if that makes sense. I think the things that we're doing are created in such a way that by osmosis you're going to learn. By doing, you're going to learn. Okay, we're not reciting facts, we're not reciting theories. I'm not going to give you tests and quizzes and those types of things. But by going through this number of tasks and by looking at examples, that's another thing that you've probably picked up on that I'm a big fan of, is that I think in order for us to design useful written documents, it's important for us to study how others before us have done it and to learn from those. And that was really the spirit of both looking at the 2 blogs and of looking at the 3 fact sheets. It's from that we can sort of generate a best practices sort of agenda or initiative, and that'll give us some really good fodder for going forward. And so that's where we're at. 16 minutes, relatively long video, had a lot to say. I appreciate it. I appreciate your hard work. I appreciate your dedication. I know that you guys have a lot going on, and I respect that more than you'll ever know. But I do encourage you, if you need help, if you need assistance, if you need a second set of eyes, if you need anything, you know that you can call, text, and email me, and I'll be here for you. Okay, take care.